I'll be looking at is titled Nomads and Snow Leopards Coexist Successfully on the Tibetan Plateau, and the primary literature is titled Spatial Separation of Prey from Livestock Facilitates Coexistence of a Specialized Large Carnivore with Human Land Use. My name is Topolosek, and this is for my Bio 182 lab final. Give a little bit of insight on this research. It is based around these two species, the snow leopard and the varroa. In this environment, the snow leopard is the apex predator. They're the top of the food chain. Both of these species are present in Asia's mountain regions, and specifically on the Tibetan Plateau, where they're examined in this research. It has been found that these snow leopards share more than 80% of their range with humans, and as these two animals have a prey and predator relationship, this is very important in their ecosystem, and many of this human land activity is actually nomadic livestock grazing. So they have livestock come in and graze onto these lands. So the effect of these livestock on these two animals is explored throughout this research and seeing if they can coexist with each other and how well. Comparing the goals and the introductions of the news to the primary literature to see how accurate the news depicts it. The primary literature states that among all wildlife, large carnivores present the most polarizing challenges and controversies for conservation. With the vast majority of the Earth's land surface dominated by humans, large carnivores are increasingly in conflict with humans because of carnivores' large home ranges and energy requirements. Conservation strategies for large carnivores are increasingly relying on facilitating long-term coexistence with humans. News states in a little bit of simpler terms that biodiversity is rapidly declining, yet the area of nature reserves is limited and it is difficult to expand them further. It is therefore vital to consider how humans can coexist with animals outside the designated nature reserves. This presents a great challenge for conservationists and policymakers. This is a little bit interesting that the article even mentioned this at all, because nature reserves are not mentioned in the scientific literature. They're specifically just discussing ecosystems of the world and in nature. So this being brought up seems interesting to the goal of the article, but it is sort of spot on, but has no relation to the nature reserves, kind of providing an inaccuracy there. Now moving on to the question or the focus they discuss, the primary literature states simply, here we raise the question, can the snow leopard and its primary prey coexist with increased nomadic grazing on the Tibetan Plateau? Obviously referring to the livestock grazing. Now the new kind of interprets this differently a little bit, almost inaccurately, like I would say. They state that in a new study published in the journal Animal Conservation, Dr. I believe it's Zhao, explores the possible impact of livestock grazing, particularly yak and sheep, on the snow leopard and prey, and how humans can coexist with wild animals. Although, this might just be misinterpreted by a reader like me, I feel like it is inaccurate because the article is not about how humans specifically coexist, it's about humans' land where these livestock graze. And they do mention this in the question, but it seems that time and time again in this article, they mention how humans are existing with animals. And they just say nomads, they don't say nomadic animals. So it almost seems as if they're talking about humans and their relationship, which may be an error from the author, it could be an error of the reader, but still it's not as accurate as the primary literature. Comparing the results, I would compare the hypotheses and the materials and methods, but the news article didn't really go into either of those in depth, whereas the primary literature did. They had certain expectations, and they believed that the varroa could either be positively or negatively affected by the livestock grazing, and as an effect, this would positively or negatively affect the snow leopard. Now, the literature explains in the results that combining the livestock and varroa location data, we found a clear spatial niche separation during winter, the resource scarce season. So these species were in different areas when resources were more scarce, which makes sense. But they found and stated in another quote that niche overlap between livestock and varroa was higher in summer and lower in winter. This graph, also explained by this quote, basically explains, so the top right picture with the ellipses is basically what they expected the spatial niche to be. The top left picture is the density amount of each of the species, the varroa and the livestock, to see the correlation between them, and then the scatter plot is just the raw data. News gives a very simple, almost just one statement response of the results. They explain, we are surprised by this result. We found that the space occupied by snow leopards and humans is actually separated to some extent. The conflict between snow leopards and humans is relatively small, and the coexistence of humans and animals can be achieved, which again implies that this is completely between humans and animals, which is not the case. And they did find that the space is separated, but only in winter, which is not discussed in the result. Again, going further and comparing the discussion or the, like I said, in the primary literature, and I highlighted it, they say during the resource scarce season or in the winter is when they allow them to coexist successfully, but they just say, this is basically their conclusion. Dr. Exo expresses the hope that the results of this study will provide an optimistic example for protecting wild animals and dealing with problems of coexistence with humans, which is very vague. It doesn't even address the fact that this only happens in the winter, as well as that they expressed a lot of problems with their research, which are not mentioned in this article. Is this news story accurate or not? Say it's not accurate. They leave out a lot of details, they draw a lot of general conclusions, and it changes the topic and makes it seem like it's about humans' relationships with animals in general. Overall, I would say it's not accurate.